right, and we are live for
Woo!
another. I think we're live. Yeah, it says live. Okay, great.
Yeah, we're going live.
For another edition of Inside.net, where we're great at clicking buttons and doing the thing.
Doing the thing, yeah.
Today it's myself and Alon Dene, and us, who some of you may know, some of you may not. If you don't, you should. A individual by the name of David Pine, and we're going to let him do his own introduction.
Perfect. Thank you, Alon and Rodney, for the kind words. I'm David Pine. I'm a .NET developer at heart, just big nerd. I love all sorts of programming paradigms and platforms and frameworks and service providers and programming languages and all the things. I've been doing development now for well over a decade. I was a consultant for a long time before joining Microsoft. At the height of that point in my career, I was a solution architect overseeing 20 different teams, helping them optimize API consumption and all sorts of massive, large scale development. So developer at heart.
Awesome.
I think it's pretty cool that you were able to oversee, you said over 20 different teams.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. There was 120 different developers, and I was the architect helping them kind of put all the pieces together and make sure that they were optimizing things. And
that's amazing. When I hear you say that, to me, it sounds like you're just a big picture type of person. You are good with the details, obviously, but you get to see a big portion, like you said, of the architect, and that's something that I'm kind of starting to learn more about. So.
Sure, yeah. It wasn't always that way. I was always very kind of narrow scoped and hyper focused on learning little tidbits and different language constructs or different ways to micro optimize a hot path and things like that. And then later in my career, I just started seeing things differently. And I don't know if that's the natural progression for developers or not. That's just kind of what I did. But yeah, now I work at Microsoft in content. So I'm a developer relations individual and writing sample source code and stuff like that. And there's actually a bit of a story with this. So I like to tinker a lot with new technologies. And I found myself tinkering with Azure AI, OpenAI. And they actually have an official .NET SDK that is in beta right now. And I was writing a front-end app to kind of play with these things. And one of the .NET PMs caught wind of this, just tinkering. And they wanted me to present it to them. So I was like, oh, this is kind of out of the blue. Sure, I'll share this. And after I presented it to them, they asked me to write one of the demo apps for the build keynote coming up later this month. So I was like, what? Me?
That is insane.
Nice.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
So yeah, I've been heads down for the last 3 weeks. And what I'm going to share today is actually that basis app that I presented to the .NET PM at the time. So I lifted some of these bits and ported them over, and we've got a repo that we're kind of heads down and cranking on and adding lots of other pieces to it. So this is the stuff before that happened. So it's still I'm rough around the edges, but it's fun. It's fun.
I bet.
This feels like an achievement unlocked moment, right? My code's going to be featured at build. Ha ha ha!
Right?
I feel amazing. So I'm sure this is great for you. So you said the story is that you were building something with the Azure AI OpenAI SDK that is in beta.
Mm-hmm.
You sure that I'm hearing things right?
Yeah.
And someone caught wind of it and they wanted to see what you were building, right? So the question then becomes, what is the Azure AI OpenAI SDK?
Yeah.
What would I use it for? Why? What does it afford me? Maybe even explain what Azure AI OpenAI is.
Yeah, that's a good starting point.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So let's take a step back because we just dove into some of the weeds there. So OpenAI, I'm assuming you've heard of it. It's a pretty cool initiative, but there was some recent breakthroughs with what's called ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is a generative AI, and its core purpose is to really, given some context, provide you with completions. So it's supposed to kind of predict the next logical. It's even down to like a token, so an individual character next in a sequence given some context. Okay. And it has freedoms to go further and further and get deeper and deeper. And but so what the Azure AI part of it is Microsoft has invested heavily into OpenAI, and now Azure AI has been around for a long time. Think like cognitive services and things like that. So this is just another tool under their library. Okay. But essentially what it is they're taking the OpenAI models that exist and they're just in the Azure cloud. And you can use them the exact same way you would from OpenAI. It's just in the same charge and everything. It's identical. It's just instead of using OpenAI and whatever SDK is out there, we have an official .NET SDK as well as many other languages for the SDKs. And it just works with your collection of other Azure services and things like that.
Okay.
So it's, the SDK, like I said, it's in beta. So it's still, we are soliciting feedback. It's been really cool kind of working with the team, because when I first started using it, one of my earlier demos, I wasn't using their SDK. I had written my own .NET client that would, make HTTP calls to OpenAI. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see this thing evolve.
So for the David, for the people who aren't specifically familiar with Azure, what can this thing do in action with Azure?
Well, it can do all the same things that it can do in OpenAI. So if you've used like ChatGPT and you've gone to the website, essentially you have like a little prompt area and you type in stuff and ask it questions or whatever, and it responds. So it's the predictive kind of aspect to it. So wrapping this thing up into an official .NET SDK and distributing it to whoever wants to consume it from NuGet, since it's, first of all, the SDK is open source. It's actually generated based on the APIs, and it works with all of your Azure other services. So like the default Azure credential just works with it, things like that. So, so I think some of the things that they're aiming at doing are expanding some of the capabilities and making some of like the parameters and things like that easier to understand. Because if you've ever read some of the API documentation that exists for OpenAI, you have to be a data scientist to ingest some of those things. You're like, what does P mean? That's just a letter P.
What's that language?
That's you're right. It's like, don't know what that is.
Yeah. this alien science.
Yeah.
So you also said that you're eliciting feedback, right? So like you said that the SDK is in beta. So it sounds like what you want is people to go out there and download the NuGet package and go give you some, hey, I liked it, I didn't like it. Hey, could you expose these things? Why is this so hard? Do we have documentation for these things? So it sounds like you're openly and actively expecting people to give you information to make the SDK better.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the working with the team has been kind of eye-opening too, because they said once it's in GA, it's actually a lot harder to change APIs, as you might imagine, right? Because then it's potentially introducing breaking changes or obsoleting various APIs and things like that. So right now, when it's in beta, and that's part of, it's like a double-edged sword, because when it's in beta, it's not really well advertised,
right?
But it's kind of we want people to look at it and we want people to use it because we want them to kind of experience it and provide, feedback, like where are the paper cuts, what's difficult, what didn't they like about the API, so on and so forth. But I did just paste a link to the NuGet package in chat here for you guys.
Perfect. Got it.
You got it, Rodney?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, cool.
Got it. So the NuGet package is here. It's NuGet packages, Azure AI.openai. Go out there, download it, give it a try. I'm sure there's a GitHub repository right there on the NuGet feed, so you can click on it, give feedback. You heard it first here. Developers like feedback on their work. It's better for them to change things before they make it real than it is, anything else. So help them out when they're in beta. Go look at it. Pay attention to it, because once they slam the 1.0 on it, you're kind of always living with these legacy decisions, folks.
Absolutely.
That's a good point.
Help your developers out. Public service announcements, Oh man,
love it.
So what this sounds like to me at the end of it is, I have this concept of a chat GPT, which is basically I'm going to use the term a skin on top of OpenAI, right? It's a head on top of OpenAI. And what the Azure SDK is going to allow me to do is make headless requests, and I'm using headless as an industry term, just saying there's a particular user interface on it. Headless requests to Azure, specifically Azure's implementation of OpenAI, right? Which is the part where it integrates with all your other Azure services. So the folks out there that want one bill from Azure, this is going to be right up your alley. You don't have to have a different bill. And then now that I have this integration, I can just start making calls and getting responses or completions, as you call it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. This sounds like fun.
Okay, not to slow down the conversation, but I was wondering if we can just back it up just a touch, just to make sure that I'm understanding and everybody like watching understands. So what exactly does Azure do?
So Azure is just think of it as like a cloud. So it's Microsoft's cloud. And it does everything. It does so many things. Like if I was to sit here and just start rambling off things, it does, it's like infrastructure as code, platform as code, services, it does everything, databases, caching, distributed messaging, containers,
oh my gosh. Right?
Website, just everything. It does everything.
What do you need? It's got everything.
I will say, like, my experience with Azure is the Azure portal. When it came to building my website, that's what I hosted. My website on was through the Azure portal. So that's been my experience.
Perfect. Well, that's great. I mean, everyone has to start somewhere. And I remember you had shared some of your experiences when I had you as a guest on my show. And you talked about your website, and that was so cool.
Thank you. So, for something like this Azure AI, OpenAI SDK, could that influence the way websites are hosted?
Not necessarily. So, I mean, if you're hosting like a .NET website, for example, like maybe like a Blazor application, you could consume it and then use it. So then it might influence some of your hosting decisions in that regard. Like, where do you want the service to live, and how do you want it to be exposed, and how are you going to authenticate to ensure that the right client browser is making the request, and things like that. But just think of this SDK as just like another tool in your bag of developer goodies.
Ooh, okay. That's always good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
On the vein of not derailing the conversation, Niels is saying that he has some feedback, but he doesn't want to derail the conversation. And I would say, in all honesty, go for it. Like,
what's your feedback?
Right. What's the feedback? Like, I'd like to hear it. I'm sure David would like to hear it.
Absolutely.
Doesn't matter how specific.
I'm sure it's very educational too.
Yeah. I'd love to hear it. And while we're waiting for Niels to type up and the buffering to catch up to his YouTube play and him to respond, some of the feedback that I had provided early on is I wanted the .NET SDK to be idiomatic to developers that are accustomed to like the iService collection and iService provider. So like some of the hooks for registering your services. So they introduced some of those idioms that we would expect. So now you can easily add and configure the client through the SDK. In addition to that, I wanted the streaming APIs to return IAsync enumerable.
Okay.
So now they're doing that, which is great.
That's good.
That's good. And I actually have some really cool stuff to show you. And I know you and I were geeking out a bit before the show started, but I had discovered just recently from Stephen Tobe, he had shared with me an API I didn't realize existed. So that, on the server, you can have your IAsync enumerable APIs. And on the client, you can actually receive that as an IAsync enumerable, which I didn't think until just recently was possible. I thought you had to actually like read like a stream and then just get the stream individually. But no, you can get like a strongly typed, like verbatim matching APIs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the way I look at it is it's similar to like the iObservable, right? Like you get the contracts on both sides. Yep. So as long as the contract exists on both sides, you just get type matching and life goes on. Yeah. Oh man, I didn't realize you didn't know that. Yeah, that's like the beauty of the async enumerable stuff is like you don't have to do any additional API conversional stuff because the contract exists on both client and server. Yeah. Oh,
yeah. Rodney, I just love seeing your mind being blown right now. You're like, wait a minute, hold up, because when you do this and then that.
So I talked to a lot of developers, right? And a developer recently told me that they found something in the debugging of Visual Studio that they didn't know was there. And like the conversation is always, oh man, I wish I had been able to tell you that because that could have saved you some pain throughout your days, right? So like it's always that place of, oh man, I wish I could have told you that. I wish I could have helped you along that way because man, yeah, once you realize how to use the tools, like things just start to flow.
Yes,
absolutely.
Synergy.
Yeah,
synergy is my favorite.
So Niels has started typing, so we're just going to go ahead and go straight into Niels at the moment.
Yeah. We are here for you, Niels.
Yeah, he says, okay, we configure the client fully from config. Okay.
Configure the client fully from config, so it doesn't automatically when I change the config values without restarting the app. Okay. So you're looking for like the iChange or I options monitor and stuff like that. I'm assuming.
The options monitoring stuff. Yeah, that's
okay. I'm actually gonna take notes on this too, so I can send this right to the team afterwards and be like, hey, we did a thing.
I love this for the record. Like I love that we are live and
talking it out.
Change. We're making change. Live. I love it. All right. So while you're typing that, I'm gonna go ahead and play the next one. Right. So the next one is the chat message serializes the JSON correctly, but it doesn't deserialize. Ooh. That's interesting. Why?
That's a problem.
Okay.
So that sounds like a bug for sure.
Definitely.
The other one sounds like the one before that's kind of like a feature request.
Yeah.
Okay. Got that. Noted. This is great. If you want like open source credit for that, Niels, you could submit the chat message issue that as a bug inside that repo. And I'll thumb it up and say, send it to the team too also. And then even for the configuration one, if you want to do that one as well. Otherwise, I'm happy to do it on your behalf and tag you and stuff like that. So just let me know how you want to roll.
So let's just go ahead and dump this in here real quick. And I believe this is what I got from the NuGet packages. So we'll see how good it is. Right there, you go. So you can go right there and go ahead and contribute. Right, and we are here live giving feedback. This is a great experience. This has already been worth it. It's
love it,
man.
Make a difference.
So here we go. Right, so we've been at this talking for a little while, and you know me, I like code. Like I like to nerd out. So I kind of want you to kind of blow my mind here.
I'll try. I mean, no promises. You're a hard guy to please. No.
All you have to do is show me something that's awesome, and like it'll work itself out.
I'll see if I can show you a thing or two.
Yeah, I don't know how to do. It's easy, and I don't know how to do a lot of things.
Okay, all right.
Me too. I'm excited to see what it looks like.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and add you to the stream, and off we go.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so the I should probably send a link for the repo. I can do that afterwards though.
That's fine.
So we've got a little solution here called Blazor Azure OpenAI. We've got some GitHub actions, and we've got a client and a server and a shared model package. So right away, if you're unfamiliar with Blazor, one of the advantages to having your APIs and your clients be in the same programming language is that you can share the models. So the contracts between those two things. So when you're serializing something over the wire from the server, it is the same object as you would be deserializing it from on the client side, which is great. So you get into various, record types and classes and things like that. And this is not super exciting, and that's okay. But it's nice that you can have these models be shared between the client and server. And that's one of the big selling points to me about Blazor. So that's cool. So let's just take a look at this real quick. We've got a public record class, and it has a tokenized response with a string property. Yep. So that's going to be like the heart of the completions. This little, essentially a single line of code. I mean, while it is 7 lines, there's the copyright header and the namespace and white space in here, and then your record definition. But let's jump into the server code because we need to blow Rodney's mind. So that's what we're going to look at doing.
Nice.
Let's start at looking at like the packages. Mm-hmm. So we've got Swashbuckle for ASP.NET Core. And if you're unfamiliar with that, it's just basically Swagger UI. It's the OpenAI. So it's since this app, the server, it does kind of 2 different things. It's responsible for serving up HTTP requests. So it serves as like it's an actual ASP.NET Core minimal API. Mm-hmm. So it's going to serve HTTP requests. So when you have HTTP requests like that, and you expose a server this way, OpenAPI, not to be confused with OpenAI, lets you define a web interface that is generated from those APIs. So we actually have like a Swagger endpoint, so we can see the different APIs that are exposed from this, which is cool.
Like the different endpoints, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
And all the contracts and stuff like that. So that's just for kind of like debugging and stuff. So then we've got the WebAssembly server. That's because this server is also going to host our WebAssembly application. And then we've got some Azure extensions and some memory caching stuff. But let's look at the Azure AI, OpenAI SDK. It's in beta 5 right now. But essentially what we've done here is our top level C# program in very kind of idiomatic C# fashion will create a web application, a builder, given the args. And I actually have an extension method that's going to add our Azure OpenAI our bits. So I'm going to go in there, and this is stuff that I wrote. So this is local to my application.
Okay.
And it's just an extension method for convenience because I didn't want to do this in the program because it tends to get messy. So I like to encapsulate that logic into an extension method or an extensions class. Mm-hmm. So I walk up to the app and I say, from the services, I want to add Azure clients. And this is, it's going to return to you an Azure client factory builder. And then from the builder, we can actually say add OpenAI client. And we get 2 different bits of information. The first bit of information is the endpoint. And the second bit of information is the API key. So given that, we can add our OpenAI client. And then, so let's go back to main. So that we're going to add some various bits. A lot of this was from the template. A few of the things are new, like I added memory caching. And then what else did I add? The other main thing here is I actually map out an API group. So we're going to have, from our server, we're going to have API route. And then we're going to map another group on top of that called OpenAI. So it's going to be API / OpenAI. And then here's all the single route that I map in here. So again, encapsulating this logic into an extensions called map OpenAI. And then from that group, we're going to say map post. So this is essentially saying if you remember where we came from API / OpenAI / chat. So we have an HTTP post endpoint for the chat route. And that's defined as returning an IAsync enumerable tokenized response.
Which is our record class from earlier that has
Absolutely.
the content.
So just making sure that I'm following along. So it looks like you're mapping the Azure OpenAI to these endpoints, right?
Essentially, yeah. So my server will have an API OpenAI endpoint with a chat route. So once my server is running, anyone could hit this, as long as it's publicly hosted. But yes. And then I'm defining that functionality within the body of this method here. Like this is the handler for that endpoint.
Right.
So we can use dependency injection into these methods. So we get OpenAI client. This is actually coming from the SDK. And then we've got the chat prompt. This is coming from the body of the post.
Right.
And then we get configuration, which comes from services. So we have a deployment ID because there's different, models that you will have configured in your OpenAI Studio inside Azure.
Okay.
And then you end up asking the client for chat completions streaming async. So it's a mouthful. But what's really fascinating is we've exposed already various options. So what you can do is you can kind of seed the additional prompt into a pre-baked message. So you can imagine, I was actually thinking about configuring this differently and adding like Yoda and all other sorts of things, but I added Blazor Clippy. So you can tell the system, right? It lets you instruct like precursor messages to add context. So we're telling the system, hey, you're an AI assistant for developers, helping them write code more efficiently or effectively. Your name is Blazor Clippy. You will always reply with a markdown formatted response, right? And then the next thing is the chat user, so this is like a user's message. They say, what's your name? And the assistant would respond with, hi, my name is Blazor Clippy. Notice the two things here. That's markdown saying like it's emboldened. Nice to meet you, an emoji. So then the user gets to respond with their actual prompt. So this is like the rebuttal. So that's kind of like, this is always the seed context, so that we're basically telling OpenAI at this point in Azure that we want it to act like Blazor Clippy. So it's going to take on that persona, so that when it responds to us, it's always responding as if it's an expert in Blazor, and it's going to always respond with markdown formatted responses.
Yeah. So you've just by putting that string in, you've assigned the role.
Yeah. Yep.
That is crazy.
So yeah, we're tricking OpenAI into thinking that. And
it's Blazor Clippy.
Right. Yeah.
So I've got a question about this, right? Because this is an individual chat message that you are defining the system.
Yes.
What it should feel like.
Yep.
So what that tells me as a developer is, Clippy. Sorry, real quick. Clippy for the win. Yeah. Yes. Clippy was fantastic. So I, as an individual developer, can reset the entire system persona for any given message.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's spicy. So
that is spicy.
That means that the system does so I can have maybe some pre-configured system definitions and allow each chat message to take on a different persona depending upon maybe the responses from the user prompt or what have you.
Yep.
So I really do like that, because you set the persona at the beginning, and then your session is tied to this persona, and it's like, you need to shift. Sometimes Siri yells back at me and she tells me I'm not nice, and that's okay.
Right. So to your point, Rodney, it's really easy to imagine right here saying take on different persona given the chat prompt. Right. So we could add like a property like an enum or something like that and expose it on the UI so that the user has a drop down. Maybe they want to interact with Blazor Clippy. Maybe they want to interact with Yoda. Maybe they want to interact with, a sales clerk, or, whatever persona you want to kind of, codify here, you can.
Exactly.
So mine's hard coded to be Blazor Clippy. But again, you kind of see how you can do this. And that's kind of the idea, is just kind of teaching people what they can do so that their ideas get going and they go off and do something way cooler than you did.
Part of the possible.
Yeah. So we get the response given that posted, kind of inquiry to the client. It returns a value. So we have our completions, like our streaming chat completions. And so this is where the async enumerable comes in. So we get our choices, streaming, we get an individual choice, and then we get from the choice, we get a message streaming, and then we just iterate over all of these things. And we're going to return a new tokenized response given the message content.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the server. The server is pretty lightweight, not a ton to it. But let's the client is a bit more involved because I added all sorts of stuff. And if you've ever looked at any of the apps I've built, I always go like a little bit too much because I just get really excited and I just keep building stuff. So
that's awesome.
But so the client side it's Blazor WebAssembly. So much like in typical fashion, our top level program entry point has a WebAssembly host builder. We create it given the defaults, and then this is all from the template itself. There are a few things that I added, namely, we have like app state. So there's various state that our app will rely on. We're adding an OpenAI prompt queue. And I'll show you that because that's really the interesting bit of code here. So essentially what this does is from dependency injection, when it's materialized, it's going to get an instance of the app's service provider. And that's because this is registered as a singleton, but some of the things that we're going to resolve are registered as like scoped or transient. So we have to create our own scope and whatnot. So we've got a public void in queue message. So here's the prompt, and then it's going to accept a handler. So like essentially like a callback at this point. So it's a function delegate that says, we're going to give you a prompt response object, and you're going to return to us a task.
Right.
And then we've got an instance of the process prompt task. That's because we want to do, and this is where Blazor gets a little interesting. So I was starting to look at various ways of managing this, because what I wanted was I want the UI to be responsive whilst still allowing the response to be buffered, because as it's responding, it's simulating being typed in.
And it's generating.
Right. It's all very, very dynamic, right? So as that's occurring, there's a lot of stuff that kind of has to happen. So I'll get more into details there in a minute. So we say task.run, and then this is our function that's defining the body of our processing of the prompt. So we've got our JSON serialization options. We're going to say the new chat prompt, given the prompt, is serialized as this little JSON argument. And then we're going to create a string content from that is JSON. And then we're going to create our scope from our provider. And then our provider is going to walk up to the HTTP client factory, and it's going to create an HTTP client. So at this point in time, we can say client post async, and this is the API OpenAI chat endpoint given the body. Yep. And then we've got our response. And if it's successful, we're actually going to read that as a stream. And when we have that stream, this is like the successful response as a stream. So it's going to be streaming over the wire. And so this is the new API that I learned about. I did not realize that the JSON serializer has a deserialized async enumerable. Ooh. So you can say, I want that tokenized response that's being sent over the wire, given this stream and those serialization options. And we can say await for each, and then get each individual tokenized response. And then this is all a little bit like fun stuff. Essentially, I'm buffering in the response, and I'm normalizing the text because it comes through as like tokenized things, and it can get a little weird. But then we just, at the end of the day, call back into the handler saying, here's the response or part of it, and whether or not it's complete, because again, it can get lengthy depending on what we ask it. So that's pretty much the queue itself. And then let me close that. And then I add a few other things. Like, so we add local storage services and session storage services and speech synthesis services and speech recognition services.
That sounds interesting.
And all of these services right here, this is an entirely a different show we could do, but
yeah,
these services and the dependency injection hooks for those services are all source generated from one of my open source projects. Ooh. And essentially what it is those services are dependency injection ready, but they're JavaScript interop service bindings.
Ooh, nice.
So I generate all those things for you, so you don't have to do them. You just consume them as a NuGet package, and ta-da, they work.
So does it involve speech at all?
Yeah. So once we actually demo the app running, I added speech on top of it. Yeah.
And dang, did I ruin the surprise?
No, you're good.
Sorry about that.
No, it's perfect. That's great question. And then we add localization because it's go big or go home. So when I first put this out there was an open source contributor, and their name is eluding me right now. But they said, hey, I'd like this to be actually localized in French. So they went through the process of adding French localizations. And I said, that's great. How about we localize it in many more languages? So I added 41 different languages. And I did that using another open source project of mine called Machine Translator, but it's using Azure Cognitive Services, and it's simply a GitHub action. So you just consume it in your workflow, give it your translator key, and it will basically let you target, like, I'm an English developer, so all of my resource files are going to be in English. So when it sees English resource files that change, it will automate a PR where it generates all the other corresponding languages that you've configured. And then, once the app matures a bit,
the future.
So then,
that's all I can say.
So later on, once you get your,
so you're definitely gonna
go ahead.
No,
I was just gonna say, so once your app matures enough and people complain about some of the machine translated things, you could hire translators to come in and hand edit things or tweak things and whatnot. But it's just a starting point to get all of the stuff in place at the very least.
So yeah, we could do a whole episode just on that, because that's spicy technology.
That is
right. That's stuff that I don't
technology.
have to do.
Yeah, I'll show you that too as part of the demo. That'll be cool. So let's see. So the app itself, we looked at some of the services. There's 3 different pages. There's the index, which is just the home page. There's a timeline, because I was just playing around with some of Mud. So Mud Blazor, if you're unfamiliar with Blazor, you may not have heard of Mud Blazor. Mud Blazor is a component library, and that component library basically provides all of these first-class citizen components of Blazor that you can just use out of the box. And it makes, you'll see Mud a lot, like Mud Grid, Mud Item, Mud Stack, Mud Icon, Mud Text. But essentially, it's just a component library that lets you put things in place. And I think it's rather beautiful once it's actually running. So let's see here. So why don't I actually run the app, and then I'll share that screen. So I'm going to stop sharing this one for a second. Stop share this, press buttons, and hope for the best.
So I've used Mud Blazor before, and I am not a web developer, and Mud Blazor just felt good. So I'll say this: if you can understand Mud Blazor as a Blazor developer, then things like Maui app is actually very similar, right? Where you have
Rodney's poor internet.
Yeah, I know.
I feel like I'm missing out so much.
so bad.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh well. Let's add this to the stream and go back here. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Let's run it.
So this is the like the landing page, the index page. And I've just got some links here. So like this image, first of all, shout out to Bing Image Creator. If you haven't seen that yet, you can go to Bing/create, and you can type in prompts and use DALL-E to essentially generate images. Like all of these images here.
Wait a minute.
So this is, again, generative AI. And I think that they're actually, I was just talking with the team, they're going to be adding this soon to the SDK so that you'll be able to generate images on the fly too.
Okay.
I'm going to have to check this out because I was just thinking yesterday, like, I want to generate an image, you know, just to make things easier.
So I'm going to tell you my idea I had, because yes, creating images is amazing, but imagine like interleaving all of these different things together. So generating not only like text, but generating images or video clips, but doing it consciously, like as a constant stream of, like, imagine like a storyteller, like a generated storyteller app that like you get to basically choose different prompts, like a choose your own adventure maybe. With AI, that would be so cool to do. Like it'd be so almost like trivial.
That could be really fun.
But yeah, so there's a link to that. This image is created using that, so it's pretty slick. And then here is the first of all, the app supports themes out of the box. I prefer the dark theme, but this is like just a timeline for the history of C# versions, the years that they came in, and the different features and clicks on those, and that's pretty cool. But let's go to the fun part. The fun part is interacting with Blazor Clippy using voice. Hooray!
Oh my god!
So let's see here. I chose for text to speech, my preferences. I want this voice. You can choose from any of these voices. I chose Microsoft Sonia Online Natural, United Kingdom, 1.25 for the playback rate. And let me see if I have a question I can type. Is there anything in my clipboard? Probably not. So we can say I can type, or I can hit the speak button and it would listen and then do speech recognition and then speech synthesis. So let's just do this first and foremost. Let's say I'll type, "What is your name?" So it's going to generate a response.
Wait, is it speaking?
Did you not hear it?
And not like super loud or anything like that, but you can hear like there's like some audio in the background.
Let me see if I can adjust things. It's part of the problem. It's trying things.
Yeah.
And if the speech stuff doesn't come through too, it's easy to change that. So
yeah.
Let's just try this. Let me do the speech. Let me make sure that's working. I wonder if there's a way to turn up my audio on my browser tab, because I did share with audio. All right, let's do this. Let me ask it a question real quick. Can you teach me bidirectional JavaScript and Blazor interop?
Oh, wow.
Which is like, that's like a tough question. Like,
I know, right? I'm like, what is that?
It's pretty tough.
Wait for it.
Shut up.
So you can see how like the responses are formatted. It comes back.
Shut up.
Is that coming through now or no?
Mark.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's pretty nice. I like it.
So I'll stop it. Yeah. But you get the point, right? So that's it's pretty cool how it all came together. And then I added like session storage. So like normally when you would leave this tab and then come back, like the stuff would be gone, but now it's persisted using session storage, which is one of my NuGet packages. Nice. And let's do.
So this is all in that. I mean, the project that you showed us, but this is the Blazor app that's being like ran right now, right?
Yep. Yep.
This looks beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's pretty.
So one of the things I wanted to do was when I well, first of all, let's do this. I'll grab the link here. This is the repo itself, so you guys will have that. You can share it.
Yeah.
So that's the repo. Let's go. I'll show you one of the pull requests because there was a recent pull request. So like every time I like as a developer, I'll write English versions of translations and stuff. And this is, I know you guys wanted to touch on this a bit. So when I initially checked stuff in, there was a bunch of resource files. And I said, my source locale is English. So the destination I wanted to be translated into was all of these different languages.
Yeah.
So this was a pull request that was automated. And here's all like the files. It did 240 files, 840 translations. And it's just a bunch of RESX files with their locale added. And it did it for me. Like all I did was say, here's my English version of this file and push it to main. And then translations wake up and run things. And so I was really excited to, as a single developer working on this, it's pretty nice to be able to just put things together and it just works. The other fun aspect is I've got end-to-end tests written. So when I push things here, I actually have a little web server that wakes up on the build and it runs tests. Not only do I have unit tests, but I have functional like end-to-end tests. So it spins up the application, gives it some context, and then exercises various screens end-to-end to make sure that they do what I want them to do.
Nice.
So yeah, like this is pretty complete. The one thing you will need is you'll need access to OpenAI. And at the time of initially writing this, it was still like on a wait list. I'm not sure how much further they've gotten yet. But yeah, it's out there. Check it out. I don't have it deployed anywhere because that would just, increase my bill dramatically.
Yep.
But yeah, if you've got a key, you can go play with it. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
When I look at this, to me, it looks like you have your own coding tutor.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of what I was leaning for. And I think one of the things to help take this further is, to Rodney's point earlier, is kind of adding like, imagine up here having like a drop down for like the different personas.
Oh yeah.
So that'd be
That's
pretty
a good
neat.
idea.
Like Blazer Yoda. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Like...
That could be very good.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's come together. I'm super happy with it. One thing to keep in mind is the message that comes through when it's buffered over the wire. It's just, those little string tokenized responses, and I add them into this builder and we end up with this big conglomerate here. But this comes through as just raw text. And it's formatted from those responses because we told the system we want it as markdown. So what I'm doing is, as it's coming through as markdown, I'm using another open source library called MarkDig. And I'm taking the markdown and converting it into Mark, HTML. And I'm telling Blazor that this has been sanitized and it's fine. And then we've got like copy controls for like the code formatting and all that stuff. And
that's smart.
Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty easy how all of this came together. But there are lots of moving parts. There are lots of things to improve upon. And I'd love people's feedback. So
what are you most excited about when it comes to this project?
Well, I think the potential for taking it further, because if you really look at what I did, and this is where like imposter syndrome comes in. And I like to think that I didn't really do anything special here. All I did was take some of my stuff that I've built over the years and applied it to a Blazor app. And I essentially reskinned OpenAI. So rather than being text-based, we've got like speech recognition and speech synthesis. So that's not really the big selling point. Some of the future bets that are being made, though, are I think the most promising. Like, so this was, of course, people can draw inspiration from this. So for me, that's a win. There's going to be a lot of more impressive and bigger things that come out of this moving forward.
David, I don't know if you saw me roll my eyes right then and there when you said you didn't really do anything, but I rolled my eyes super hard. I just have to tell you that. Because like the fact that you even did this, like that's amazing. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I mean, I only wrote this in a couple days. Like it wasn't.
That's awesome.
It's just kind of in passing. Yeah.
Well, you wrote this sample in a couple days, right? But you said like this thing depends on NuGet packages that you've built.
Yes.
And so what this is you consuming your own dog food, right?
Yeah.
which is admirable in and of itself. You're testing your own API surfaces. You're building something
That's a
cool.
lot.
You're building an artifact for the community to look at and say, oh, I can do a Blazor app this way.
Right.
Even just the way you laid out Mud Blazor, somebody might get value off of that, right? So like, don't sell it short. You never know who's going to get value from the work that you've done. Right. But it's there. It's an artifact. Somebody's
beautiful.
Stumble across it. Somebody's going to find value in it, and it's going to be great for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is, I put the link here too in the homepage because I wanted people to give credit where credit's due. But yeah, this is the component library. It is lots of fun. Do you want me to paste that into?
Yeah, no, chat? I got it. I'm bringing it up.
Okay.
I'm going to do the thing.
Do the thing.
And clicking buttons still seems to be bad. Oh, see, can't click.
So I could show, if people are interested in looking at some more of the code, if there was things that I glossed over that didn't make sense. I know some of the client stuff I was really light on. So if there's specifics that people are eager to learn more about, happy to double click into any of those things and share that screen again and work through it.
Is it possible
to bring that screen up again? Because
I was just gonna say, is it possible to take a look at those services again? I believe it was the speech recognition service. Is that a whole other episode in itself?
So let me do this real quick. I will share this screen again. Present.
And then Rodney, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was going to tell him to let's talk about that iAsync enumerable API surface that he
I want to learn more about that too. So
all right, so I will show you real quick. Blazor Raiders. So inside, so one thing that a lot of people are curious about whenever I present like Blazor Raiders and stuff like that is like the speech synthesis and speech recognition stuff. So this is the project called Blazor Raiders, so Blazor source generators. And I have a WebAssembly app that deploys out here that shows this is like a demo for like local storage and geolocation, and it prompts you and you get the response and everything. And all of these little, all of these bits of functionality are actually source generated. So I just have a sample app that's deployed and built out and people can go test it out. So lots of people ask about like the text to speech and the speech to text and like, how does that work? So I'm going to show this real quick. So if we hit, let me put this inside here. So I just brought up my developer tools. I'm bringing up console, and a lot of people probably don't know this, but if you go to window inside your console, inside DevTools, there are lots of different APIs in here that exist that people don't know about. So like speech synthesis, right? This here. So let's just do that. S equals this. So now S, we can say speak. We can say new speech utterance. And this is inside my browser. And anyone can actually open up their browser and do this right now. I can get rid of S. It's stupid. We've got speech.
A parenthesis on the end.
Yes.
There you go.
Live debugger.
Yep.
So, did you hear it come through? No, maybe not. But if you do that, if you open up your browser and you do F12 and you type speech synthesis, that speech given this thing in a string, it will speak whatever is in there. And it's pretty powerful. So all of those APIs that exist, like the geolocation, the speech synthesis, things like that, those are essentially very well known. And since they exist and are public on every implementation, let's go to can I use. So if you're unfamiliar with caniuse.com, this lets you essentially type in different key things and look for like popular browser coverage for various APIs, like the speech synthesis, typing, press it. This one here, speech synthesis. Not that one. Go back. This one. So speech synthesis API. So you can see that it's got 95 or 95.7% global coverage. So that means out of the wealth of different browsers that exist that are in the wild, including things on your mobile devices, the speech synthesis API is correctly implemented per spec on nearly 96% of those.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So because it's such a well-defined API, it's a great source for source generating, because speech synthesis has, you know, paused and pending and speaking, and it's got cancel methods and get voices and speak, right? That's the API we just looked at inside the thing. So all of these contracts exist, and Blazerator takes advantage of those by their TypeScript type declarations.
Nice.
So I've got a source generator for C# that actually generates NuGet packages based on those APIs.
On the TypeScript API.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. And you can just make your computer talk.
Yeah.
I feel like we're like taking that very lightly right now.
Yeah.
I don't recommend it because you might start freaking yourself out. Like it starts talking at really random points in time. But you know, buyer beware.
Oh my God.
I'll go home here. I'll share that too. That anyone wants to try that out. That's public and out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else? What else can I show off? So those are, we talked about some of those services. Let's look at the workflows. So the workflows. So I've got a .NET build workflow. And what this does is whenever things are pushed to or come in the way of a pull request on main, we are going to wake up and we're going to run on Ubuntu, and we're going to check out the source. We're going to set up .NET and with .NET 7, we're going to restore, build a release, and run our test. So that does the end-to-end testing and things like that. That's pretty cool. And then localization. This is the whenever we got a target of en.resx or razor.en.resx, we're going to wake up and run our translations. And I've got a blog post I wrote about this. This one's actually been a couple of years old now. Yeah, and it will generate pull requests for you and do all sorts of fun stuff. Yeah, I don't know. There's so many different things to this. So it's, I guess, wherever you guys want to go. And I don't, how much time do we have left? Oh my gosh.
Well, we're almost done.
we flew through this.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't happen. So fun, right?
I know. And Rodney, you still wanted to check out the IE enumerable, right?
The async enumerable stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Let me share this one. Share. Stop. Share. Share screen. Async enumerable. All right. Ta-da. Okay. So server, I'll go back to the server side. So the server side, this is just as a reminder, I'm going to minimize this. This is the await for each. This is, so these APIs are returning async enumerable, and likewise, my post on the server here is returning that as well. So that's pretty cool. And then on the, so that's the server side. Now the receiving side, I've got my OpenAI prompt queue, and on the receiving side, we have an HTTP client that makes a post to that endpoint.
Right.
And when we receive it, we can say response content read as stream async, and that stream that comes through, we can walk up to the JSON serializer, deserialize async enumerable. So it's going to take that stream and it's going to give us those individual tokens. So if you were to read this, like before I knew about this and before I knew about this API, I was asking for help. And I remember I went to Stephen Tobe was one of them. And he's like, you'd have to write your own, protocol. He's like, that doesn't exist, the stuff that you're trying to do. And he's like, well, wait a second. Actually, if your API returns, a strong type, something that's going to be serialized, he's like, you can get the stream. Because I was reading the stream already. But when I was reading the stream, I was reading it naively, character by character. And I had a huge amount of logic in here that was trying to do the tokenizing and stuff. And it was terrible. So instead, he's like, well, you could use this API, which I didn't know about. And I'm happy I know about now. That lets me get those tokenized responses and work with them on the client.
Right. So what I love about this is that like this deserialized async enumerable, like it's a first class citizen now, right? Like it's a thing. It's right there on the, I'm assuming this is system.text.json serializer, right?
Yep.
So now what we're saying is you don't even have to do like I enumerable and then the type of tokenized response, right? Like the I enumerable is implied, like the I async enumerable is implied. So here's a stream of data, which you can get the stream of data from the web, and boom, I enumerable of this type. That concept for me is really powerful, because what that says is that we're being like it's a first class citizen, like we're investing in it. We want you to use it, and we want you to find value in it. And so that's a really good thing to be able to find little nuggets like that in there when you're trying to do hard stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
So would you say this was like a hidden gem then? The
Absolutely. For me. Yeah. I already started writing a blog post about it because I was like, oh my God, I got to tell the world.
Yeah. Everyone must know.
Everyone's got to know this. Yeah.
All right. Well, we are running up on time. It has been a wonderful episode. David, thank you so much for coming, hanging out with us, showing us awesome stuff, new APIs, client libraries, client server libraries. I mean, you basically showed us
a couple things,
more or less how to build a Blazor app today. So, I mean, thanks for that.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It was great. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, Rodney, and you, Alon. Always fun.
Thank you for joining us. I learned so much, and I learned how to make my computer talk too. I'm going to terrify myself with that. So
that's awesome. Great.
All right, folks. Well, this has been another episode of Inside.net. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Bye.